The wind never really stopped out there. It carried the scent of dry sage and sun-baked earth, and it sang through the rusted wire that stretched from post to post across the open plain. To most men, that kind of emptiness meant freedom. To us, it meant debt, danger, and a kind of promise that always came due. We weren't the kind who owned much. We drifted from job to job, herding another man's cattle, branding another man's calves, watching the dust settle on land that would never belong to us. Folks used to say the West was won by men like us, but that was a lie told by those who wrote the histories. We weren't winners. We were the reward, the bounty that others took when they'd outlasted us. Until the rancher came, and everything shifted, like sand under a boot heel. Back then, before his arrival, life moved by the rhythm of the herds. Dawn came up pale and thin over the plains, and we'd already be in the saddle, coffee cooling in our tin cups, horses stamping against the morning chill. The range stretched endless, dotted with mesquite and prickly pear, and we'd ride it till the sun burned high enough to bake the sweat into salt on our shirts. Evenings were for mending tack, swapping lies by the fire, and counting the stars until sleep took us. There was comfort in that sameness, in knowing tomorrow would look near enough like today. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was something close to it. Our outfit was small, 6 riders and an owner who barely rode anymore. Old Man Graves ran the place from a porch shaded by cottonwoods, his leg busted years ago in a stampede that never quite healed right. He wasn't cruel, not the way some were, but he treated us like a part of the machinery. Feed, ride, brand, move, repeat. He paid on time, which made him decent in those days, but he didn't ask questions about who we were before we signed on, and that suited us fine. Every man out there had a reason to disappear for a while. I'd been with Graves 3 seasons by then. Long enough for the lines in my hands to fill with dust that wouldn't wash out. I wasn't running from the law, though some thought I was. Truth was simpler, the war had ended, and the peace didn't fit me. I'd fought for the Union, rode with a cavalry company that spent more time chasing ghosts than fighting men. When it was done, I came home to Missouri to find my father's farm burned and the river full of bodies. So I turned my horse west and didn't stop till the land looked clean enough to start forgetting. The range was good for that. Out there, your past didn't matter, so long as you could ride hard and keep quiet. The others had their own ghosts. Tom Gentry was a gambler with the kind of luck that made men suspicious. He'd once won a horse and lost an ear in the same night. Navarro, the Mexican hand, barely spoke but played the guitar soft at night, his songs carrying something sad enough to make the coyotes pause and listen. Then there was Clay, youngest of us, with a face too smooth for the sun and a mouth that never stopped running. He still believed the stories of gold, glory, and land grants. We let him believe it. The West needs its dreamers, even if the dust swallows them quicker. It was a dry summer when the rancher rode in. I remember because the creek behind the bunkhouse had gone to a trickle, and the grass was brittle enough to cut your fingers. We'd been pushing the herd north, trying to find graze, when we saw the dust trail first, one rider, moving steady. From a distance, he looked like any other cowhand, hat pulled low, coat dark with travel dust. But there was something about the way he sat his horse, too still, too certain. Most men bounced a little, shifted their weight on long rides, but not him. He rode like a post planted in the saddle. When he reached us, the first thing I noticed were his eyes, gray, sharp, like they'd seen too much to bother being surprised. He didn't give his name at first, just asked where Graves was. We pointed toward the ranch house, a good 6 miles back, and he thanked us with a nod that felt more like a command than gratitude. Then he spurred his horse and left us in his dust. None of us spoke until he was out of sight. Later, when we made it back, he was still there, standing on the porch with Graves. They were talking low, but the tone carried, business talk, hard and final. By sundown, word spread that the man's name was Coulter. Ezekiel Coulter. He'd come from Texas, where rumor said he'd owned land enough to lose 3 times over. Some said drought took it, others said men did. Either way, he had money again, real money, and he was looking to buy. Graves, old and worn, was looking to sell. At first, it didn't mean much to us. Land changed hands all the time. The herds still needed moving, the fences mending. But within a week, we felt the difference. Coulter wasn't like the other ranchers. He didn't ride for the pleasure of it or to show he could. He rode to measure, to count, to own. He carried maps, deeds, and a kind of quiet authority that made men fall in line before realizing it. He hired new riders, men who didn't smile and didn't talk much. One by one, the old hands started drifting off, heading north toward Cheyenne or west toward the mining camps. By the time the leaves turned, there were only 3 of us left, me, Navarro, and Clay. The first time I saw what he really intended was the day he brought the wire. Barbed wire had started creeping across the plains then, a new invention folks said would change everything. It did. Before that, the range was open, cattle roamed free, and the sky was the only fence. But Coulter brought wagonloads of that wire, sharp and endless, and set men to stretching it across miles of prairie. He called it progress. We called it a cage. You could hear it singing in the wind, a metallic hum that replaced the songs of coyotes and nightjars. The open range was closing, and with it, something inside all of us began to close too. The small ranchers hated him first. They'd been running their herds through those plains for years, grazing wherever grass grew. Now Coulter's men were cutting them off, claiming waterholes, and shooting strays that crossed his fences. There were warnings, then fights, then blood. One morning, we found 3 cows dead near the east pasture, bellies bloated, tongues black with poison weed. Someone had driven them there, hoping to spoil the land. Coulter rode out himself, said nothing, and that night, 2 men were found hanging from a cottonwood by the creek. Nobody asked questions after that. Navarro wanted to leave then. Said the land was turning mean. I told him he wasn't wrong, but leaving wasn't simple. Wages were steady, and Coulter had a way of making you believe that what he was building might outlast the rest. Clay stayed because he still thought he could earn enough to buy his own spread someday. I stayed because I didn't know where else to go. That winter came hard and early. Snow drifted high against the bunkhouse walls, and the cattle huddled close, their hides rimmed with frost. We worked from dawn to dark, chopping ice from the troughs, driving the herds to what grass they could find. Coulter was everywhere, riding through blizzards as if the cold couldn't touch him. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were measured, like he was counting each one against a debt only he understood. Some nights I'd see him standing alone by the corral, staring out toward the hills, and I'd wonder what he saw out there, maybe ghosts of his lost land, maybe the outline of an empire he meant to build from ours. By spring, the snow melted, and the land turned to mud. Graves died that April, quietly in his sleep. The preacher from town came to say a few words, but most of us knew Coulter owned the land before the ground froze again over the old man's grave. After the funeral, Coulter called us together. Said he was expanding the operation. Bigger herds, tighter management, better breeding stock. He talked like a general laying out a campaign. There was no room for sentiment, no room for old ways. I looked around and saw the new men behind him, hard-eyed and ready. Progress, he said again, like it was a sermon. Clay tried to speak up. Said the fences were choking the life from the range, that the neighbors were restless, that men would fight before they'd bow to wire and rules. Coulter looked at him the way a man might study a splinter in his hand, an inconvenience to be removed. He told Clay he was free to leave if he didn't like the work. Clay left that evening, packed his gear, and rode east. We found his horse wandering near the river 2 days later, saddle empty, reins torn. We never found Clay. After that, Navarro wouldn't play his songs anymore. Nights grew quieter, heavier. The laughter that once rolled easy between the bunks turned into whispers. We'd become part of something we didn't understand, a machine grinding toward an end we hadn't chosen. And yet, we stayed. Men always think they can ride out the storm, that somehow it'll miss them. It never does. One evening, near midsummer, I rode out to check the north line. The sun was low, burning red through the haze, and the wire hummed with heat. Off in the distance, I saw riders, 3 of them, moving slow along the fence. Neighbors from the McCall spread, judging by their gear. They stopped when they saw me. One raised his hand, not in greeting but warning. We talked across the line, voices carrying easy in the still air. They said Coulter had bought up another 100 acres to the east, land their families had grazed for generations. Said he'd hired gunmen from Abilene to protect his interests. They told me to watch myself, that sooner or later he'd turn on his own. I wanted to tell them they were wrong, that maybe Coulter had his reasons, but the words felt thin in my mouth. When I turned back toward camp, the sky was purple and full of thunder. That night, lightning struck the east pasture. The fire spread fast through the dry brush, wind driving it straight toward the herd. We rode out half-dressed, beating at flames with blankets, driving cattle through the smoke. I saw Navarro go down when his horse spooked, and I pulled him clear just before the blaze took the fence. By dawn, the fire was out, the land black and steaming. Dozens of cattle lay dead, hides blistered, eyes white. Coulter rode through the ashes without a word, his coat streaked with soot. When he dismounted, he looked at the bodies, then at us. His eyes were cold, but there was something else behind them, calculation, not grief. That was when I knew the fire hadn't beaten him. It had given him an excuse. A week later, he ordered us to rebuild the fences, double thick, stretching farther than before. He said he wanted control, total control. By then, men had started whispering his name with a kind of fear usually reserved for outlaws and legends. The rail company came sniffing around, offering money for right-of-way through his land. He turned them down flat. He wanted no trains, no towns, nothing he didn't command. He built his own wells, his own storehouse, his own rules. The ranch became a world unto itself, and those of us still working it might as well have been part of the soil. One night, I found Navarro packing his things. He said he was heading south, back to Chihuahua. He pressed his guitar into my hands, said I'd need it more than he would. I tried to stop him, but he shook his head. A man can't live where there's no wind, he said. I didn't understand then, but I do now. He was gone by dawn. A month later, word came that bandits had caught a rider near the border, took everything but the saddle. They never found the body. That left me alone, the last of the old hands. Coulter trusted me more than the others, maybe because I didn't talk much, maybe because he knew I'd seen worse. He started bringing me into his plans, talking about expansion, irrigation, new breeds. He spoke of the future like a preacher speaks of salvation. But there was something hollow in it. He wasn't building a legacy. He was burying something, maybe himself. The day I realized what he'd buried came in late autumn. We were riding the far ridge when we found a half-burned shack, long abandoned. Inside, under a layer of soot and dust, were bones, small ones, a woman and a child maybe. Coulter stood there a long while, staring. Then he said quietly, "This was mine once." I didn't ask what he meant. When he turned away, there was no sorrow in his face, only resolve. That night, he ordered more wire. The land changed after that. The grass grew thin where the fences stood, the waterholes dried quicker, and the herds grew restless. The open range was dead, fenced and claimed, and the men who'd once roamed it were either gone or bound to wages they couldn't live without. I rode those lines day after day, listening to the wire sing and thinking of what Navarro had said. A man can't live where there's no wind. Sometimes, when the sky was clear and the moon hung low, I'd hear the faint echo of a guitar, soft and far away, carried by memory more than air. And I'd think about Clay, about graves, about the men who'd come and gone. We'd been the reward once, the hands, the riders, the ones who gave shape to another man's dream. But now, even the dream had fences. When I finally left, I didn't tell Coulter. I just saddled my horse before dawn and rode north, past the last post of his empire, where the wire stopped and the wind began again. Behind me, the land lay cut and silent. Ahead, the horizon waited, empty, endless, unforgiving. I didn't look back.